Welcome to another episode of the Science Citizens Podcast. My name is Sandra de Vries, and this is the podcast for the citizen science enthusiast and critic. With my company Polsagua, I advise and assist in the development of citizen science projects for environmental issues. In this podcast, I share with you my experiences and discuss the more philosophical, ethical, and controversial sides of citizen science, while demonstrating its potential use in environmental science as well as the available tools. In contrast to the case of bird counting I discussed in the previous episode, there are still sufficient citizen science programs that are not accepted as official data source yet. In the past 2 years, I studied the case of monitoring plastics in Dutch water basins. I will share how this study came to be, explain how citizen science initiatives are playing a role now, and give insights of myself and others concerning their role in the future of plastic monitoring of freshwater. In the last decade, the pollution caused by plastics in our environment has received more and more attention. First, the focus was towards the so-called plastic soup within our oceans, but research shows that a great portion of these plastics originate from the rivers flowing into the ocean. In the European Union, there are until now no policy directives targeting plastic pollution in rivers. The good news, though, is that the Dutch Directorate General for Public Works and Water Management, called Rijkswaterstaat, is developing a roadmap towards monitoring solid waste, including plastics, to obtain insights in the behavior and quantities of plastics passing through the Dutch water systems towards the ocean. As some of you might know, the Netherlands is actually a last passing station for 4 different river basins, so actually a very good place to monitor and perhaps remove plastics before they enter the ocean. However, many others are far ahead of Rijkswaterstaat, realizing that the urgency to solve this problem is high and that they could not wait for the government to start. The issue of plastics polluting the environment has incentivized NGOs, companies, and individuals to start without them. In the past years, only in the Netherlands, initiatives like Plastic Spotter, Scouts for Science, Clean Rivers, the Great Bubble Barrier, Noria, By the Ocean We Unite, and many more started to both clean and monitor the Dutch water basins. Furthermore, there are apps that can be used by many different citizens to monitor plastics in their environment, like Literati, Crowdwater, Plastic Avengers, and Earth Challenge 2020. Realizing this, Rijkswaterstaat decided that they needed to learn from these initiatives and see how to enhance cooperation between these initiatives and themselves. They partnered with the applied universities of Rotterdam and Zeeland, and with the citizen science platform Water Lab of the Delft University of Technology. And since I am part of the Water Lab, with my company Polsagua, I had the honor to lead this endeavor. So, when I said that there are many citizen science initiatives monitoring plastics in the Dutch water basins, you would be surprised how hard it is to combine their efforts. This is due to the many differences they have. For example, while all of them collect data, some put the focus on education more than on data collection, and vice versa, resulting in different data quality, quantity, and detail. Also, when you want to monitor plastics in a water body, you need to choose where you monitor in the cross-section. Do you monitor plastics left behind on the riverbank, the floating plastics, the suspended plastics in the water column, the plastics that sunk to the bottom? Many initiatives made a different choice here. Furthermore, the Netherlands is a water country with many different water bodies, all accounting for different hydraulic conditions. Rivers, canals, estuaries, they all influence the way the data makes sense. Then you need to choose how you will monitor the plastics. How often, at which locations, using what method, and the method you choose results in a parameter with a specific unit. Comparing different units isn't always easy. And finally, you need to consider the people that you involve in your monitoring program. Are they consistent volunteers that you can train properly? Or can anybody join and contribute to the monitoring with, for example, an application on their smartphone? To make sense of it all, we started classifying these initiatives according to those differences. With that, we initiated a cooperation process with several online stakeholder meetings. About 40 different participants of perhaps 30 different stakeholders, 30 different organizations, that's what I mean, participated in that process. The process unraveled that aside those differences, there were also many similarities and agreements. I mean, imagine, first of all these initiatives work towards one goal, reduction of plastics in the environment. And to do that, they are all very, very willing to cooperate. Second of all, they all realize that transparency and open data is essential, and that their found data should be combined for the public to see. It would also be a first step to research the interoperability of the data. Well, third similarity is that all participants agree that the benefit of applying citizen science in the case of plastic pollution monitoring is that it increases the temporal and spatial potential, and that it immediately provides for an increase of awareness of this issue. And finally, they all had in common that their future budget is insecure. They depend on volunteering work or sponsor money, making them making them much less sustainable. Of all initiatives, Clean Rivers is the most consistent, with the largest coverage. They monitor along several rivers in the Netherlands by now, using the OSPAR method, adapted for rivers. OSPAR is a commonly accepted method for classifying and counting plastics at beaches and oceans. The initiative is a combined effort of 3 different organizations, each of them having their own role for either volunteer recruitment and coordination, researching and validating the data, and 3, outreach and advocacy towards policy and companies, for in the end to decrease the plastic entering the environment, which is of course the end goal of the whole endeavor. Okay, so there is actually a very good monitoring program already existent here in the Netherlands. Why doesn't Rijkswaterstaat immediately work together with them? The answer is twofold, or perhaps even more, but these 2 I will go into. First, Clean Rivers uses citizen science methods, and although we don't want to acknowledge that, perhaps, often citizen science methods are still under discussion, not being trusted on their data quality. And the validation program of Clean Rivers has not been proven enough for Rijkswaterstaat's taste. So to validate the monitoring of their citizen scientists, Clean Rivers staff actually do validate, and they go do checkup rounds in the same period in several locations, where they carry out the exact same monitoring procedure. However, they do this on different stretches than the stretches that the volunteers do their monitoring. Of course, because if you would do it on the same stretch, you wouldn't find any plastics anymore after the volunteer has been there. Second reason for Rijkswaterstaat to not immediately work together or use the data is that Clean Rivers does not weigh or define the mass of waste they find, which is an important unit for Rijkswaterstaat policymakers. So 2 good reasons to hesitate in the cooperation. I also wanted to experience myself how it was to monitor for Clean Rivers. And how else to do that than as a volunteer? So I signed up, and last week I joined twice to monitor a 100-meter stretch of riverbank. The first time I went with my official buddy. I signed up as a single volunteer, but the idea is that you volunteer with 2 people, so that you have 2 pairs of eyes, 2 pairs of hands to do the monitoring and to make sure that the monitoring is done correct. And then you are assigned a specific stretch of riverbank along one of the rivers that they monitor on. And I was assigned one very far away from me, since I live in Rotterdam, which is on the west side of the country, and I had to go all the way to the east. But I saw it as a nice endeavor, especially since I don't go around so much anymore due to Corona. So here you can hear my experiences in that first round. So I'm sitting here at the river Rhine, at the location where Ida and me have to take the monitoring measurements. And it's a 100-meter stretch on a really beautiful stretch of river. I think we have a lot of luck with the weather. It's without wind almost. The river is like a mirror. And we just finished doing the monitoring. First time for both of us. And I think overall we had a huge amount of small pieces especially. We also encountered the average plastic bottle. We had 3 balls for playing with your dog. We have, of course, many lolly sticks. We had several pieces of plastic bags and many pieces of foam. They joined the high water line. So in the beginning we really had to look through the list of OSPAR. Schone Rivieren has made a specific list that is related to the OSPAR ocean list, but then specified for rivers. And there we tried to, of course, define it in the correct way. So we used also a photo manual where they have defined several harder pieces of plastics and other rubbish. So whenever we didn't know, we tried to define it together. So we advised each other and discussed the possible origins. We next to that also took pictures of all the pieces of plastic where you could define a brand. So in case that the brand can actually be used to find the original source, then that is a very valuable information. We will also insert that into the Literati app. Of course, this stretch of riverbank has already been defined by Schone Rivieren, and we can also on the other side of the riverbank see another stretch of 100 meters that will be monitored by another couple of volunteers, of citizen scientists. I actually had a lot of fun doing this. Not sure if that has anything to do with the fact that I need adventure due to a corona lag. But I definitely love to be outside, and the river is one of the beauties of the Netherlands, of the Dutch landscape. There have been many geese, different type of geese, different types of other birds, different types of ducks that we have seen flying over. Sometimes in a natural way, sometimes disturbed because of paragliders sometimes, yeah. I think what we noticed is that there is a specific sluice here in the middle of our stretch. Yeah, the highest number of bigger pieces were found in particularly around the sluice and around some fences that are placed there by farmers. I am going to now ask Ide to perhaps share some of his experiences. Okay, Ide, please let me know what you think. How did you experience this first time of monitoring? And maybe more important, why are you joining?
Waarom ik dit doe, dat is heel simpel. Ik ben geboren en opgegroeid en vergroeid met deze rivier. En ik vind het daarom heel belangrijk dat die rivier ook...
Why I do this is very simple. I was born and raised with this river, and I therefore find it very important that this river stays clean. When I was young, we could easily swim here. Later on, the river got polluted very much, although it improved a bit over the last couple of years. But I am of the opinion that it should be even better, and that all the floating plastic that you can find here should be removed. It is not good for nature, not good for the environment, it isn't good for anything. And with this research, we want to ensure that, when the results end at the right place, that it will be used for the better.
Resultaten ergens landen waar er oor naar is, dat ook dat men er wat mee gaat doen.
Yeah, actually there is something interesting. When we just finished, we saw one of the neighboring inhabitants of this area passing by with her dog, and she apparently was also so annoyed with all the plastics always lying here that she nowadays has the custom to bring a bag and just take it away, which is very good, and we should stimulate that everybody does this, but it's probably also something we should note to Schone Rivieren, clean rivers, because perhaps she also actually removed some of the plastics that we should have monitored, and that was of course not possible now anymore. But all in all, of course, we should encourage this type of behavior. When we walked back from that stretch to the place where we had parked our car and bike, perhaps a kilometer further along the river, we found many more pieces of waste that we tried to pick up as much as possible. You don't want to leave such a waste behind if you are already doing the work, then why not just a little bit more? And although we did not record these pieces, I did notice how different the number and type of waste were from the ones we found on our stretch. I realized that to validate our data, Clean Rivers should perhaps consider a different tactic. Validating our efforts is necessary because you want to validate that we follow the instructions carefully and apply them in a consistent manner, and to validate that we as citizen scientists can distinguish the different pieces of waste according to the ASPR list. The current validation methods do not cover either of these uncertainties, though. I would recommend to randomly choose a statistical number of stretches as validation location. For those locations, we could have Clean River staff check the stretch soon after monitoring to see whether the citizen scientists followed instructions, and ask those citizen scientists to keep the pieces they found for the Clean River staff to record the pieces according to the list. That could be then a very good check of whether both the uncertainties are to a certain level comparable to what the staff did and found and what the citizen scientists did. And in that way you have indeed validated resulting data. Just a suggestion, of course. So hi Michiel. Thank you for being willing to answer this question. As I already explained before, we have in the Netherlands the situation that there are already many citizen science organizations working on plastic monitoring. But of course, Rijkswaterstaat has a certain responsibility to start monitoring concerning this environmental issue. How do you envision that the future can look like? How should they work together to create a good monitoring program?
Oké. Zoals ik er naar kijk, is het zo dat in de rivier, zoals we hier ook aan de Waal staan, die hier wel misschien wel 300 meter breed is het voor burgers vrij moeilijk om dingen op het water te doen. Ook om ze...
The way I look at it, in the river, like here at the Waal River that has a width of about 300 meters, it will be quite difficult for citizens to monitor at the river, to ensure their safety while monitoring, for example. That should always be the main point of attention for Rijkswaterstaat. However, Rijkswaterstaat will never be able to approach the monitoring density that Clean Rivers can achieve with their, I think, about 400 volunteers by now. And their results are quite good, with good quality measurements, looking at their publications and also at how we are doing the measurements ourselves. It is quite seriously applied, and it will provide good quality data. Combined, it will lead to a better insight into the sources of this waste, the distribution, and perhaps added with a mass determination of what we collect here, and then we will get a better grip at where plastics come from and what we can do about it.
Meer zicht op de bronnen, meer zicht op de verdeling, uiteindelijk misschien toegevoegd met iets van massabepaling van wat we hier verzamelen. En dan krijgen we toch steeds meer grip op waar het plastic vandaan komt en ook van hoe er iets aan te doen is.
Okay, very clear. Thank you very much. So this was Michiel. He works at Touw, which is an engineering and advice or consultancy firm here in the Netherlands. And they also work on the plastic environmental problem. Michiel also works on different other citizen science programs here in the Netherlands. And we could definitely consider him as an expert in this field. So thank you very much, Michiel. As the title of this podcast already revealed, I am of the opinion, just like Michiel, that citizen science monitoring can and should play a part in the national monitoring of plastics. This should be a combination of both regular monitoring and citizen science initiatives. The power of citizen science data is especially important for plastic pollution because it provides the possibility to have a wide spatial and temporal coverage. It is essential to receive enough information because there is still so much we do not know about plastics distribution and behavior in water. Several steps are still to be taken, though, to enable such a monitoring system. Among others, to ensure that validation of the citizen science data is properly accepted, but also to find a sustainable way for these initiatives to continue and cooperate. I hope you all enjoyed this episode of the Science Citizens podcast. I would love to hear what you thought about it, so don't hesitate to send me an email, tweet, or other type of message. Also, if you have any interesting topics I should cover in this podcast, let me know. In the meantime, keep thinking, stay interested, be a science citizen.